Okay, and we're live. So thank you all once again for joining us for the Field to Fork Turkey Hunting webinar series. This is the last of our 5-week webinar series that we focused on turkey hunting and all the aspects that go into it for all the new turkey hunters out there. All of the webinars are being saved on YouTube. If you're joining us YouTube live, welcome. And thank you each and every one of you who have joined us each week on Zoom. We hope that the experience has been beneficial for you to be able to interact with the guest speakers and the department representatives. So I will introduce myself. I am Becky Wallen, the Field to Fork coordinator for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. I have been turkey hunting since I was in college. I grew up deer hunting, didn't get into turkey hunting until I went out with some friends and have been hooked ever since. It's something that I really truly enjoy in the spring, and something that I look forward to as soon as the weather starts turning. So I will not ramble on too long about myself. I really want to give you guys the opportunity to meet our awesome guest instructor tonight, Ashley Hudnall. So I'm going to spotlight you, Ashley, and let you introduce yourself.
It's nice to meet everybody. My name is Ashley Hudnall. I am originally from Ohio, but I've lived in Kentucky for, goodness, 12 years now. I grew up turkey hunting and deer hunting, squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting, did all of those things. I started kind of trekking along in the woods with my dad before I was allowed to carry a gun. I shot my first turkey when I was 10 and have not stopped ever since then. So it's something that is it's my favorite thing to hunt. Always has been, and I don't, at 25 years, 26 years, I think this is my I was trying to add it up. I think this is my 27th season coming up this year. And it's absolutely, it's, the one thing, it gets my blood boiling, if you will. So now being married, having kids, it's the one thing that I get to go opening day. It's not up for discussion. My husband duck and goose hunts a lot, and I get first rights on opening day for turkey season. So I'm excited to kind of talk about what I've learned, what I've found to be successful over the years, and where I've learned through error. So happy to talk about a lot of that. And I think kind of for a loose agenda, we were going to talk through scouting and kind of different things to look for, ways to scout, and then into hunting tactics and kind of same thing, what's worked, what's not worked, and everything along those lines. And I think, as Becky stated, wanted to kind of hit the pause button every time we kind of broached a new subject. Should anybody have any questions, we were going to kind of open it up as we switched topics. I did have, since we just had some issues with my audio, I was going to screen share some pictures. We'll probably bypass that because I don't think I'm going to be able to do that from my iPad. So I'm so sorry that happened. Got to shift here to kind of, I had a loose agenda. So for scouting, just to kind of a sidebar on it, or just kind of my stance or view on it, for me, it is just as important as the hunt, if not more. I think there's so much valuable information you can learn by, I call it doing your homework, researching ahead of time and being prepared. And a lot of times hunting trips get turned into scouting trips. If the birds didn't cooperate, if they didn't do what I thought they'd do, or they weren't where I thought they were at from previous scouts or hunts, it can quickly change. But one kind of getting started, or, where it can be a little daunting or overwhelming if you don't know, like, how do we scout? What does that mean? Well, when I was growing up, it meant walking into the woods before light and hearing where they were at, and every day getting a little bit closer, trying to, I was always a student of the thought that I wanted to be as close as possible without busting a bird, to the point where I've busted plenty I wanted to know exactly what tree he was in and what limb he would like to sleep on. If that's something that you can do and you feel comfortable doing, I have found that to be very successful. But to kind of reel that back, a good place to start, if you don't want to start with just diving right into the woods and going that kind of riskier approach, some maps and some tools and technology that's available today that, wasn't just 4 or 5 years ago, are one thing that is a valuable tool is Google Earth. Google Earth, if you're not familiar with that, you can put the app on your phone, you can go directly to it on your web browser, and from Google Earth, you can punch in an address, you can punch in a park, you can type in a county, and from there you can zoom in on particular places. You can see topography, you could see fields versus timber versus ponds. Like you can see, it's literally like a 3D satellite scan of wherever it is you want to look into. So just to kind of, if you're hunting a new place, if you are going to go hunt public, if you're going to kind of venture out to a place you don't know, that, in my opinion, is a good place to start with having just something kind of at your fingertips, even real time. It can be something that you're literally using while you're out there. To transition to that, an app that I use regularly is OnX. I think it's called OnX Hunt now. I think it just used to be called OnX, but I use that not every day that I'm hunting, but especially if I've gained access to a new farm and I'm not as familiar with property lines or how something lays. I use that all the time. Or if I think I'm flirting with being at the back of a property, I will pull that up. Or if I hear a bird, I'll pull it up and try to, where do I think he is if I'm somewhere I'm not super familiar with. So I think those are really good, again, technological advancements that you could use to your favor. Another cool thing with OnX, you can mark pins. You can do it on Google Earth as well, but you can drop points. So let's say you have established, where a bird is roosting, you can save that pin. I've even done it to where if I know what tree I want to sit at, I can drop the pin directly onto that. So if I am not as familiar in the morning when it's pitch black outside, if I have to use my phone to find exactly where it is I wanted to set up, it can be helpful for that as well. So kind of shifting gears outside of kind of some tools that you can use. Another scouting tactic, if you will, is field or road scouting. I know that sounds a little kind of potentially unorthodox, but it can be, a very good tool depending on the time of day, let's say, or, I do this a lot. If I'm scouting one farm, if I've got some that are within the vicinity of each other, I'm going to go the long way home and I'm going to drive by and check a field out. Maybe there's, I could have birds, hopefully, in a couple of places that I can go hunt, and knowing if they're around, or, maybe at a certain time of day, if you're out and about driving past that field, seeing a bird out in a field at 9:30 or 11 or 1, would just kind of, or even at night, same thing on them potentially going to roost. Road scouting and field scouting can be very, very valuable. Another time that can be helpful is when it's raining. A lot of times you can find them out in the fields where they might not have been out there. I'm not typically, if it's pouring down rain or if it's thundering lightning, I'm not going to go scout. That doesn't mean I'm not going to go check my fields a couple hours later just to see kind of, are they there today, or, just can I lay eyes on them, just to kind of, to know what's kind of shaken and what I might be working with, especially if I want to go hunt tomorrow, if time allows. Additionally, kind of, again, to go a little bit deeper on potentially finding roosts, if you are hunting new property and or you're just newer to this in general, or you're hunting public again, a good way to try to find roosts in the evening is by trying to get a bird to shock gobble. Typically the tools that I've used for that are, I think, a crow call, which I think sometimes that can be effective. I think sometimes that's probably a little overdone, but if it works and you get a response, that's awesome. I use a goose call sometimes, and same thing, owl call. You can do the same thing. Additionally, I've even like road noises or car horn beeping. Me and my husband have done that before, where I didn't hear a bird. I tried to put one to bed, never saw him, didn't hear him. If let's say he was somewhere scouting or I was, like, hey, drive by before I get in my car and just beep. And it's, oh, he is here. He wasn't vocal tonight. It sounds, again, kind of unorthodox, but if there is something that, just to be able to hear that shock gobble and know there's a bird around that there, you could mess with the next day, is good to know. So with weather conditions, I did want to talk about that just a little bit. I have found, like, the windier it is, the rainier it is. I think, as my dad actually used to say this when I was little, like, turkeys are a lot like us. When it's rainy and gloomy outside, you're kind of in a blah mood. They're kind of in a blah mood. I've not had, I've shot turkeys in the rain before, but it's, if I don't have, if I'm not hearing them and it's not, I can't see them, it's hard. And typically when it's rainy, windy, that's probably not going to be your highest potential or percentage days, but I mean, you're not going to kill one from the couch. So if the opportunity presents itself and I know I can get out and I know there are some birds around, if it's raining, I'm probably going to head to a field. But additionally, to kind of shift gears a little bit on scouting in general, while I am scouting, if I have found birds and they're roosted in front of me and I watch them physically fly down, just some tips on that. Pretend you're hunting. You need to be just as still so that the whole idea is they don't know you're there. You don't want to spook them if you can avoid it. I think turkeys are by far the most paranoid animal I've hunted. I think they spook, at a stick cracking that one of their friends did, and then you could move and somehow they didn't see you, but they definitely are a paranoid animal. So I typically, if I'm scouting birds, I have them in front of me, I'm going to wait until they are well out of line of sight before I'm going to move. If I was way off and I can slip out, I will, or, sometimes I have had to bust birds before if I have to leave. But I've tried to wait as long as possible. For that, on the other side of that coin with birds spooking and whatnot, it's just because you spooked a bird doesn't mean it's not a killable bird. It might not be a killable bird that day, but it could be, just maybe not in that exact spot. As quick as turkeys are to spook, they're just as quick to forget, I feel like, or not even, they're not, I shouldn't say they're not an intelligent animal, but their brain is very, very, very little. I do believe it's more of a fight or flight type of approach. It's not I learned from that mistake type of thing. I don't think that's how they process things. I'm not a biologist, but from what I've witnessed and kind of watched, that's kind of my view on that. But you can, again, if let's say you went and scouted and you didn't see birds, there's other ways to know if turkeys are around through different sign. Again, I had some pictures and I'm so sorry that this kind of shifted to where we can't look at them right now, but
I could probably pull some up, the ones I sent you.
Yeah.
If you want.
Yeah. If you wanted to pull up some of the scratching ones, the scat one, that would be helpful just in the event someone's not familiar with what that looks like. But typically what you could look for is turkeys scratching the leaves a lot. They will leave very long, just basically clear dirt from searching for bugs and insects and potentially like gravelly type things to eat. You can find that it's going to look very different than, imagine a squirrel doing that. Yeah, they're perfect. Thank you. And then I think there was a couple of those. And then the other one I was going to show was, I don't typically, obviously I see this, I think it's just so normal for me. But turkey droppings or scat, if you're not familiar with that, we have a picture that shows the difference between female and male. If you could, again, growing up, same thing. I'd always heard that males comes out in almost like a J shape. So my dad had always said J for Jake. And so it was easy to know the difference in those droppings. If you have that one, Becky.
Yeah, sorry. Should be pulling it up
Okay.
right here. Here we go.
Perfect. Yeah. So just a couple other ways that just because you didn't physically lay your eyes on birds doesn't mean that you didn't have a productive trip to the woods. If you found feathers, you found this, you found scratching marks, you found another thing that we didn't have a picture of are like dust bowls. If you're not familiar with those, they'll literally be pockets in fields, sometimes the wood edge, where turkeys will literally sit down in the dirt and dust themselves. And you can find it. So again, same thing. If you're seeing those types of things, thank you. You are where turkeys like to be. And I think that is to not overcomplicate turkey hunting. Being where they want to be automatically puts you at an advantage. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Becky. Those were it for kind of the pictures that I think I had. If you, again, through scouting, finding those things, just because you didn't see birds doesn't mean that you didn't potentially learn something and or gain, very helpful, impactful insight. So that was kind of all I had on scouting. So if we want to hit pause and see if anybody, well, not pause, but a virtual pause, if anybody had any questions, can come off mute or put them in the chat if you don't feel comfortable chiming in.
There is one question waiting for you in the chat. Ralph Alito was wondering, do you tend to hunt out of a blind or run and gun type hunting opening day?
Opening day, I will, if I've scouted and I know where a bird is, I'm going to try to set up on that bird. I'm not a big blind hunter. I will if I need to. If I can't get in the woods with him, if I can't, let's say they've been in the fields or it's raining, I like hunting on the ground simply for visibility. That's it. I have blinds. I will use them. They're just not my favorite style, if you will, but they absolutely serve their purpose. I think blinds are awesome too, especially if you're taking kids or even if you need to move. If sitting on the ground for 2 hours is not something that's ever going to work for you, and you need to sit in a blind, There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. I like the freedom of not having to lug that to where if I do need to run and gun or something doesn't pan out or I want to go hunt another bird, I don't have to pack that. But for me, opening day, ideal situation, I'm going to have a bird I know I want to hunt and I'm going to set up on him in the woods or tree line or what have you.
Awesome. The next question is, do you have better luck scouting in the morning or afternoon/evening?
Good question. So morning by far. So that I personally, I know that everyone kind of has a different view on this. I personally like off the roost hunts if they can happen, right? So if I have a bird that I know I can get close to, I think you increase your chances because there's, 100 other things that are going to happen to that turkey throughout the day. And him getting henned up, which is going to happen once he hits the ground, but can I be between him and his hens, or is there a way for me to intercept that? Is typically, again, my preference. For scouting, I want to know where that bird is sleeping, and I want to know where he goes. Again, typically, I think turkeys are usually very habitual. I say that, you could scout a turkey. I've had this happen. I've scouted a turkey and I've watched him sleep in the same tree on the same limb day after day after day. I know where he flies down. I can set my watch by what time he's flying down. Some birds are just that way. I know where he lands. I know where he walks. Something we didn't talk about during scouting is strut zones. Some turkeys like to establish a strut zone. And what that means is when he hits the ground, it's now time for him to show off. He's got a spot that he's going to go do his little dance for all the ladies in the woods. And he may stay there. Like if you've been hunting and you're hearing a bird go back and forth, he's in a strut zone. And he could have a few of those. He's probably going to have one off the roost, and he could have a midday one. He could have just few spots that's where he goes to find his girls. And that back and forth, that's him in a strut zone. And if I know where that is, I'm going to be near that if I can be. Sorry, I'm trying to pull the chat up just to make sure I didn't lose any topic there, because I feel like I got a little, there it is. Okay, got it. So yeah, so for me, I personally like scouting in the morning. In the same breath, I do like roosting if I can. I have 2 small children, so that's proven to be a lot harder the older I've gotten. But I do think that it's definitely very valuable to know if the bird is where I think he is going to be or where I've seen him in the past, so that I can plan for the next morning. So I can see the chat now too, Becky, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so do turkeys tend to roost in the same tree? So again, I would say it's more about probably the general vicinity. Again, I've watched some turkeys. So again, I don't know if it's the same bird, if there's been 2 or 3 together. But yes, what I would say, typically the general vicinity. That there's so many variables though, as I stated, there could be turkeys that roost in the same area every single night. And the night you decide to go scout, as they were coming to there, they got jumped by a coyote or a person, someone on their tractor. Like there could be 1,000 different things that alter what those turkeys were doing in that exact moment. So I don't want to say, yes, they're always going to do the same things. But I think it is fair to assume that they will be somewhat habitual in that way. The question about trees, let me pull that back up. I don't know. I don't necessarily think it's so much about the type of tree, other than like a larger hardwood is what I've typically seen. I think that's by design, simply on, they're up in a tree if that wind's blowing 5 miles an hour, or if that wind's blowing 20 miles an hour. I've watched trees do this with birds in them. That can't be fun. And so I have seen sometimes if they're in an itty bitty one, I'm like, wow, why did you pick that? When there's, something with a much larger branch. But yes, I think from my experience and my history, I would say more than likely birds are if you've found birds roosting, you'll find them there again. Okay. Anything else on scouting before we switch over to hunting tactics?
Rafaelito had a question in there, but I think we're just about to talk about it. If we miss it, Rafaelito, we'll definitely come back. It looks like there was one more question that popped up for scouting. And it's kind of related to the roosts that we've been talking about. Do they prefer to roost close to water?
I think that's probably all relative. I've hunted farms where there's not water anywhere close, and I've had birds. And so there, maybe. I've hunted birds that roost right on creeks. So I'm sure it's probably just you could probably throw a dart at the wall and get, I don't honestly know. That might be more of a biologist question, because I'm not sure if there's a study around that. I've seen it both ways. So.
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting, knowing your perspective that you've seen it both ways. I think you're right that it has a lot to do with their what they consider their home.
Right.
And it's going to include water somewhere, because they do need it to survive. Of course. Yeah. And I have heard at least once or twice that if they roost over a creek, they feel a little bit more safe. Like they understand that the water is safer, that nothing's going to crawl up the tree, at least directly below them.
Right.
But that's a good question. Okay, I think that's it for scouting and roosts. So I think we can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so for hunting, I think one thing I just wanted to kind of touch on is the prep before hunting. So again, I feel that, everything looks frozen on my end. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, and we can still see you as well.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Again, while scouting to me is absolutely a huge part of this game, if you will, and part of the preparation, something else that I think is really important is packing your vest. The reason for that, I literally know where every single call is. I know what pocket has my diaphragms. I know which call is I run a lot of friction calls. I know which friction call is in the front, and I know which friction call is in the back. And I know where my strikers are. I know which pocket has my extra shells. I know where my extra face mask is. All of that to me is invaluable. And it's because I've been burned by not doing this. And so learning from mistakes, knowing where everything is at. When it's pitch black, you're going to be quieter. You're going to be more stealthy. You're going to be smoother. I do always have, I always put my face mask on, or at least pull it around my neck before I get in the woods. Just little things that seem to, be a big help. That again, they're tiny, but they're very strategic and thought out types of kind of tips, if you will, on, again, things that I think are important to just, if it can improve your hunt just a little, the edge is beneficial. So the day has come, you are ready to hunt. We kind of started to talk about it. So I'm going to go backwards from kind of my preferred, ideal perfect hunt is I've scouted. I know where he or a couple of them are at. And I know exactly what tree I'm going to set up on. And I'm going to sneak in there before the sun has even thought about coming up and set a decoy or two. And I'm going to creep back to my tree and I'm going to get ready and I'm going to wait for the world to wake up. And I'm going to be anxious and he's not going to gobble when I hoped or expected him to. And then I'm going to think he's not there. And then 5 minutes later, which feels like 20, my hope is he sounds off and the hunt plays out exactly as I wanted it to in my head. And he flies down and I can, call to him if I have to. I may not need to. That is one thing, just a note on calling. I am also a student of call as little as possible. The more you call, what I've watched, the more I call, it's 9 times out of 10, it's not necessary. If I've overcalled and a bird shut up, it's probably my fault. I definitely try to, in the years in the woods, I want to emulate how a hen is. Now, I've run across plenty mouthy hens that have a lot to say, but that's usually because she might be competing with me, right? And so if I have a live hen around me, I may cluck at her just to get her going. Cause there's nothing better or more real. Like, I can't do it better than her. And so I'm going to let her call for me. If that were to, present itself. Now, with that being said, in the tree, kind of off the first roost, I've definitely ticked off the wrong hen, where if I've called before they're on the ground, she flies the opposite direction. Well, he saw her, he went with her. So I don't love to call before they hit the ground, but if I've not heard a hen, or I don't know if he knows I'm there, I may do a couple soft yelps just so he's aware. But other than that, I'm not a big caller before fly down. And then same thing, I'm going to be very mindful of how many turkeys do I have around me. And that's the other, you may not know, there could be branches blocking you if you are set up close. So you got to be very careful with movement. That is, in my opinion, the number one killer of a turkey hunt is moving. Turkeys have, again, I talked about them being paranoid, but what I mean by that is if you're going to bust a bird, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be because you moved when you shouldn't have, or you moved too much. They, again, are very paranoid. I believe, again, not the biologist, but I'm pretty sure their sight is very close to an eagle, if not sharper. And they can see almost 360 degrees because of the way that their eyes are. So they could be looking here, but they can still see you over here. And so definitely movement is key. And so that's why, again, I like to get in there before, obviously, well before anything started gobbling. Typically, and that's one thing too, if you get there late and you are wanted to get close and they're already gobbling, I would not do what I was going to normally do. I wouldn't creep in. Chances are they're going to see you. Being up in that tree, they could see you from forever away. So I may try to go where I think they might end up going, stay further back, stay, on a hillside, whatever it is. If just a kind of sidebar on that, setting up on a bird that you potentially know is there if you were to get there late. Again, we kind of broached the subject on blinds. Again, I've killed turkeys out of blinds. It's usually been in the rain because they're going to go sit out in a field for 2 hours. I don't want to sit out in the field for 2 hours and get soaked. So I use blinds if it's raining and I know that there's a bird that I want to be in on the game with. But again, they've served all kinds of purposes, with especially if you have trouble sitting still, or you do because your back or whatever. Kids, same thing. I think and the cool thing about, if people deer hunt, you can if you set up a blind, a deer is going to see that, and it's not, they have to be comfortable with that. For whatever reason, with a turkey, you could set that blind up the morning you're going to hunt and it does not bother them one bit. But if I went and sat out in that field, that's not going to work. So the blind definitely does not seem to, I've never had a turkey be like, what is that? And and I'm usually putting a decoy or two out. It's like they're blind to it. It's not anything that I've ever had bother a bird ever. Now, I'm sure there's plenty of people on here, or people that would argue that and say they have had that happen. I just haven't. So, and then there's run and gun. My husband and I argue about this all the time. It's absolutely his favorite style, and it's my least favorite style. I like to be in control if I can, but again, run and gun has its absolute, there's times if I have struck up a bird, mid-morning hunts are pretty fun. And so walking in, not knowing what's around and striking a bird, depending on, how far do I think he is? Where do I think he is? Is he on a field edge? Is he in the woods? Is he hundreds of yards away? Will all determine on what I'm going to do. If he's far away, I'm going to cut the distance. But I'm also, again, this is every year, this is where trial and error, because I've probably busted birds trying to do this. I don't want to get too close, but I also, if he is 300-400 yards away, all of that opportunity does, if he's responding to me, that another hen could get to him well before I could get to him. So I'm going to try to cut the distance. I'm going to probably go, again, if he's 300-400 yards, I'm probably going to try to go 80 to 100, and I'm going to call again. And I'm going to see, did he just come 100 yards or did he stay right where he was? That way I kind of know, like, is he matching me, or do I need, what's kind of happening there? What dance are we doing? And same thing, like, is he where I thought he was? Like, he could have been turned when he gobbled and now he's facing me. And so what I thought was 400 yards just turned into 200 yards. And so again, binoculars. I'm big on those when you are going to run and gun, always watching, especially if you are coming up on a field. Like, again, it's it's very potential that they could see you before you see them. So run and gun is cool, but there's also, I've killed more turkeys being patient than I think you ever would being too aggressive. And so that's where you can kind of marry the styles together. If you've struck a bird up and you have cut the distance, and he's at last year, I struck a bird that was probably 250 yards away. I went as far as I felt comfortable going because I just didn't want to bump him, because I'm fairly conservative in that regard. And it took him 2 hours to get to me. My husband, he'd have probably left at like 30 minutes. Like, I'm done with this. And that again, that's fine. He's very successful with it too. But I enjoy that part of it a lot. And so I like the, being able to kind of shift gears or combine the different styles dependent on, what's going on with that, what that particular bird is doing. So I'll pause there. And because I know that was kind of a lot in a very short amount of time.
Okay, so we've got, let's go back to Rafaelito. He asked if you could describe your setup, which you kind of gave some examples already. Is there anything else that stands out that you want to add to it?
I think I'll talk about, so in my setup, so I will usually take 1 or 2 decoys. I know that if some of you watched the gear one or the equipment one, they could have talked about this, but I'll just tell you what I've done and what I find to be successful. I don't like carrying a lot of stuff. Some of the farms that I hunt, I have to walk a good distance to get to where I'm going. And God willing, I shoot a bird, I got to worry about, this other 20-pound thing I have to haul out of the woods. And if I'm going up and down hills or bluffs or crossing creeks, I don't need a lot of other stuff. I use hard molded decoys. Now, I could probably alleviate some of that by using the collapsible ones. I like the hard molded ones. I think the paint jobs on them are just a little more realistic and the shapes of them hold. But don't get me wrong, I've used the fold up ones for years and have been successful. But what I wanted to add is if I'm going to use 2 decoys, I'm going to probably use a Jake and a hen. If I'm only going to use one, I'm taking a Jake. I've found that mature birds will typically respond to a Jake before they'll respond to a hen if she's by herself. If they hear me as the hen calling and they see a Jake and they just can't see her, I've found it seems to pull them a little faster of like, oh, there's a Jake with her, I need to get there now. And so for me, if I'm only going to take one, I'm taking a Jake. For my setup, again, I'm usually going to be leaning up against a tree. I'm going to be sitting like knees up, gun across my knee. And that's usually, I'm going to have it resting on my knee. I'm going to have a pot call out and I'm going to have a diaphragm in. And I'm going to have my decoy 20 yards, give or take. If that's, that's my, again, ideal setup, perfect setup. If all of those things are controllable, that's usually what I'm going to be doing. Same thing for, if you're going to be using decoys, that's usually about that way. If one holds up, at 40, I can still potentially shoot at him. If one holds up at 60, then, if you put your decoy at your furthest shooting range, you're just potentially extending that bird to be that much further away. So 20 yards is my sweet spot with that.
Awesome.
Okay.
So let's see here. When you set up a blind, do you set up the decoys at the same time, like in the dark?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to obviously be out doing anything when the sun is coming up and they can see you. I do everything in the dark of night that you possibly obviously can. I think you want to get in there before they're awake. You want to get in there before they can see anything. Obviously, like there's moonlight, and that I will argue that when it is full moon, it can be tougher to get as close. Just simply because, sometimes that thing's like a spotlight, and I probably would hedge back a little bit more unless I'm going to get in there super early and they're still asleep and I'm going to hopefully be as quiet as a mouse. Then yeah, but I 100% do everything before you're going to get set up while it's dark.
And you were talking about the decoys, and like if you only took one, it would be a Jake. So would you say that for a new hunter, if they wanted to use decoys, the very basic ones they could get is a Jake and a hen? And maybe what positions?
Yep. So yeah, thank you. I had that written down to talk about postures. So so Jakes do come, and hens come in like feeding. They even come in nesting. They even come in breeding poses. For a hen, I've usually gotten if she's like a kind of a active or a feeding position is what I've usually used for a hen. For a Jake, the one that I've used the last probably 5 or 6 years is the 3/4 strut Jake. I think that is not necessarily aggressive, but could elicit an aggressive response from a more mature Tom. So I like the 1/4 strut Jakes. I have full strut like Tom decoy if and when I need it, but I would use him later. Like if I've been hunting a bird and I just can't get him to break, I can't get him to break the distance. It's funny, and I feel you're going to have aggressive birds and alpha birds and dominant birds, and you're going to have passive birds. And so there's a lot of times, depending on the farms, you're going to have one dominant bird and you could have 4 or 5 passive birds that have been beaten up during the spring fights and who's going to be the boss. So I don't like to use a full strut as often for that reason, because they may think that's him and they may not want to come check out what I got going on because they don't want to get their butt whooped like they have all year. So that's, again, I'm sure you could ask 5 people and they probably all have a different opinion, but that's what I've kind of learned in my stance on that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's some really valuable information. We get, decoys, even for me still, I'm like, there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, it can be daunting. You walk into a store and there's 15 different ones. And that's, for me, again, it's all, you can spend $20 on a decoy. You can spend $200 on a decoy. It's kind of, what your budget allows for and what kind of gear you want to have and the investment that you want to make into that. It's there's, and you'll see when if you don't have one and you go shopping, you can notice the differences in the paint jobs and the quality of the materials and that type of stuff. But again, I've shot turkeys over probably a $30 or $40 decoy, and I've shot them over a $200 decoy. So it's kind of personal preference on what kind of gear you want in that capacity. But I saw someone's question about struck. Apologies. What I meant by that is a bird responding to me. So I've done a series of calls to elicit a bird to gobble back. So when I say I struck a bird, that means he has responded. So I've called, he answers, he gobbles back. That's what I mean by striking a bird. You're welcome, Olivia. Sorry. And so, sorry, excuse me. And with that, so with calling, again, if I'm going to do a mid-morning hunt, my calling tactics are going to be different than what they were at first light. If I am, and again, there can be different tactics in just the hunt. If I'm going to walk a farm and try to strike a bird, I'm going to call probably every 50 to 100 yards, depending on kind of the path that I'm taking and where I'm trying to get to. What I don't want to do, I don't want to walk up on a field edge and scare a bird because I didn't call and I didn't know he was there. So what I'm trying to do is find him before he sees me, type of thing. So is there one around that wants to play ball? Is there one that's lonely? And that's the thing, like, just because he responds, he could have two hens right beside him there. He still may not come play. And so those are things, again, you're not going to know until he may respond to you and you may never hear him again. And an hour just went by and you're like, so for me, I'm someone, if depending on what he's going to, like, where I think he is, again, am I going to cut the distance? Am I going to sit down? I will say this, I have struck birds that were 50 yards from me, and it just somehow there's some miracle he didn't see me and I didn't see him, type of thing, or the way the hill lays. And sit down, sit down, shut up, get your gun. You don't need to do anything else. That's happened before. And then the same thing has happened to where they were 400 yards away and 3 hours later, I'm still like waiting. Now the whole time I'm not twiddling my thumbs. I'm either calling every 15 minutes. And usually I'm not going to wait 3 hours on a bird that only responded to me once. That's something that has transpired to where he's closed distance, he's responded, and chances are another hen got between us. And now I'm plan C. So, and a lot of times you don't know that until you sit it out a little bit, and, or you could potentially see that occur, but a lot of times that's not usually how that's happened unless you're hunting like a really big open field. And then you're kind of trapped in your options anyways. So, but in those regards where if I have a bird far off, and I can tell he's not coming, I will try again. I may move 50 yards on him. I may move 100 on him. It just kind of depends on, what I think I can get away with, how the ground lays, that kind of stuff. So I just saw another question pop up. It seems hard to hunt the mountains of Eastern Kentucky due to roosting on the ridge. How would you approach? So yeah, I can appreciate that. I've always heard people say it's a lot easier to have a bird come down to you than it is to have him come up. So, not obviously knowing exactly the what you're dealing with them roosting, but if you can get on level with them or through scouting, if you can find out where they're flying to, I would try to be there. If you can basically, like, those are kind of two big pieces of the puzzle. I think that's why I like turkey hunting so much, is I think it really is truly is this game of chess of wanting and needing to know where they are, where they want to be. And if there's a way for you to make those two things happen, your success rate will, I think, go up, because you're injecting yourself into where they naturally like to be. Turkey hunting is difficult in the regard that you are truly talking a bird out of what he was going to be doing naturally. And so it's this manipulation game of knowing what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and when to move. That is one thing I wanted to talk about too. I'd had a note to bring this up. So let's say all of the culmination of all of your prep and all of this occurs and a bird's coming and you can see him. Shot placement is something I wanted to make sure we talked about. Becky, if you can pull up that one picture where the bird, he's kind of like half strutting, kind of half walking.
Yeah, I think okay. I know which one you're talking about. Just give me one sec.
So if you haven't, and apologies for those of you that have, I can see some on the wall. Where I hold is right where their wattles meet their feathers. What I, again, was kind of taught growing up was if the bird gobbles and his head goes forward, yeah, thank you. So right there where the red meets the brown is where I hold. And again, the reason for that is if he gobbles right there and I'm holding at the top or crown of his head, or, on the near his eye. And he gobbles his head. I mean, when a bird gobbles, I think you have one of him of another one gobbling. If you can pull that up, you can see their head can drop an entire, a long distance, where if you're holding down here and they do this, that doesn't move as much, to where the bulk of your shot is still potentially going to be in the game. I will say something that I do try to do when I have a bird come in, if they are in strut, or I try to wait until they're out of strut, or I try to make them come out of strut by clucking with my mouth call. You can, if you can't do that, whistle. I've even seen hunting shows where they literally, people say, hey, like, to try to get them to, because all they're doing there is like, what was that? But it makes them elongate their neck. It makes them come out of strut, to where if a bird is in strut, I know, again, I think everyone has a different opinion on this. I don't like to shoot a bird in strut if I don't have to, because I don't want to get as much. Yep. So as that other picture you saw, when they're standing straight up, their head moves quite a bit, or can. And so just basically anything that can increase the percentage for you, I'm in favor of. And so the top of their head is going to move the most. The bottom of their neck is going to move the least. So that's usually where I'm holding. Something I wanted to add too, if 2 turkeys come in, which if they do, awesome. But then there's or 3 or 4, obviously you can have hens around, you can have multiple gobblers. So, again, movement, everything. And I always try to be set up on my decoys, because ultimately I'm hoping that's where they're going to go. I'm hoping that's where they're looking. That's the ultimate goal, right? Sometimes you do have to move, and just remember, the more turkeys there are, the more eyeballs you have on you. And the more I've been busted by a hen I didn't even know was there, trying to move on a bird that I thought he was in strut. Now it can work out sometimes. A lot of times if I am going to move on a bird in strut, I'm going to wait until he turns around and his fan is blocking his vision. So we talked about that 360 thing. If he is turned 360 degrees facing away from me and he is in full strut, he can't see me if he's directly. So that's the perfect time to move. Now, there could be other birds around. I'm still going to move if that's the one that I want to shoot, because I'm going to move and then he's going to stand up when his friends putt and I'm going to shoot, is hopefully the goal, or how it's going to shake out. Something that I wanted to talk about too, if there is just 2, like let's say there's 2 toms, one's in strut, one's not. Again, I was taught this and it makes a lot of sense to me. So this is just kind of my school of thought and how I've kind of gone about it. I will shoot the strutter. I'm going to try to get him out of strut, but chances are he is the dominant bird. The reason I want to shoot the dominant bird and why you want to shoot the dominant bird is there could be 5 or 6 gobblers around, and you may not know there's 5 or 6 gobblers around because they're afraid of him. He is the alpha, he is the king. And I've had birds where I've shot a dominant bird and within 2 or 3 days, my farm has blown up and there's turkeys I didn't know were around. And so for me, if given the option and the opportunity presents itself, I'm going to try to shoot the dominant bird. So just something I wanted to add. If they both come in strut, shoot the one you have the best shot with. And same thing, I would never not shoot one that might be potentially the passive one. If I only have a shot on him, I'm going to shoot him. But if it plays out and they both come to the decoy, I'm going to shoot the one that I believe to be the dominant bird.
We did have a couple of questions pop up. I don't know if you could see them. One is, do you hunt the same birds or the same farm multiple days during the season?
Absolutely. I'll hunt the same farm back to back if I have to. Now, if I've bumped a bird and I have another place to go, I might let it rest. But no, there's, depending on kind of how things shook out, let's say I hunted and they just weren't where I thought they were going to be, or I hunted and it just didn't pan out. I saw him fly down and then I never saw him again. That's happened more times than I'd like to admit. And so I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back there tomorrow because I know he's round and I may set up 20 yards different. I may, more depend. Again, I may try to be more where he landed. I may try to, it just kind of depends, but absolutely. I don't look at it like deer hunting where you could burn a place out from your scent and all of that. You're not dealing with that with them. It absolutely.
Nice. Okay, and then there was one. What shot do you use, lead or steel? And do you have to use turkey loads? So we're getting a little bit into the equipment here.
Yeah, no. So I use lead, or have for many, many years. The last couple of years, I have started shooting the TSS, simply because I'm increasing my impact, I'm increasing my load, I'm increasing everything. And if I'm only gonna shoot 1 or 2 turkeys a year, for me, I'm okay to spend a little bit more on my shot. But for a very long time, I used Winchester Supreme number 6s, and I've shot probably 20 plus turkeys with that load. There is absolutely nothing wrong. Then they came out with that Longbeard XR. Love that load. I'm sure I've got some downstairs. So I usually use 6s. I know a lot of people use 5s. I just liked having a few more pellets if I needed them. So, but yeah, I think the last 2 years I've used the Apex TSS.
Awesome. Okay, so do you change your approach as foliage begins to become thicker through the season?
I'm not sure I change my approach so much as obviously it just gets a little tougher because it's thicker in the woods. And the flip side of that is it's harder for them to see me too. And so I might try to hunt a path, or I might set my decoy on a path, because that's going to be, and I might get off of it a little bit to use that foliage to my advantage, where the woods might not be as open. Visibility is going to be a big thing. And so you definitely need to be able to see what you are shooting at and when you are shooting and all of that. And, I want to increase that potential of what I can. Seeing a turkey is definitely better than hearing a turkey. So I want to obviously set myself up to try to watch what's happening as much as possible. So I maybe tweak it a little bit, try to, I guess, be a little bit more mindful of that. But on the flip side of that, I can hide a little bit better too. So sorry, my dog's barking if you guys can hear that. And then a couple of other items I wanted to talk about on like the safety component, especially nowadays with a bunch of the decoys that have the full fans. Just be very, very careful with those. I'm not a big fan of those, just because I can control what I do. I can't control what other people do. I'd like to hope that if I'm hunting private land, if I know someone else is there, that's not like, I'm not a big fan of that, but I know sometimes that's the only option, and that's okay. I definitely, I don't walk around with a fan. That stuff's folded up and hid and non-visible and I'm very mindful to, if I have a strutter out, I'm heightened in, there could be another hunter that could shoot at my decoy. It's happened. You've seen it on the news. It will continue to happen. Sometimes people are not safe and they don't think things through. The same thing goes with you as a hunter. Always knowing when you are going to shoot at that turkey, what's behind that turkey? Is it, can you see all of that? Is it over a hill? Is it not? Just so be mindful on that when setting up, setting up your setup with your decoys on you can control that. And so just always trying to be as safe as possible. And yes, I did have this in my notes, but I'm really glad that person added it. For undergarments and or scarves or whatnot, never, ever, ever, ever wear red, white, or blue. I'm always wearing blacks or tans or browns or green. It's probably wear grays. But that is something that was just instilled into me as a child, and I will cram down my kids' heads too. I'm earth tones. As you saw in some of those pictures, those heads look like the American flag, and anything that looks like that is not something you want on your body. And that I will say too, I carry my decoys in like laundry type bags, so that I'm never carrying a male decoy that could ever be, or even a female decoy that could ever be mistaken. It's hidden, it's covered up, unless I'm sitting down hunting. So. And then I saw the problem I have after fly down, their feet hit the ground and they get lockjaw and head the other way. What do I do? So I guess my question to that is, can you be where they are going? Or are they heading there is, again, I truly do believe you can call too much. I don't, again, not saying that that's what's happening in this situation, but they could be going the other way because it's been too vocal. They could have hens that way. If it's you set here, they go this way, you set here, they go that way. That's happened to me. I've hunted a bird, I want to say it was 5 or 6 days in a row. I sat low, he went high. I sat high, he went low. It took me 5 days. I think I sat in the middle so I could do both. And luckily it happened well that time. But no, I'm not someone who ever, I wouldn't say don't go after them. With that, you might, maybe that's a mid-morning spot. If you've not had luck, there's a farm that I have access to that it's not the best in the mornings. There's birds around, but they go to another property and there's not a lot I can do about that now, but that's been one of my most successful 9 to 11 spots. If I didn't have a good hunt somewhere else, I know where I'm going. If I didn't have a good hunt, I didn't hunt there early. So possibly tweak that just as if you haven't tried that before. But if there is another way, if you are setting up by the roost and it's not turned out for you and you have any inkling of where they're going, set up there. Or, in between with that, even if it's 100 yards off or 80 yards off, just to see how that goes.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat. If
Okay.
anybody has one they want to come off mute and ask, we'll give you a sec to decide. This is a lot of really good information.
Hope it's been helpful.
Yes,
Again,
definitely.
Pass along what I've learned in trial and error. So.
All right, friends. Well, that was the last call for questions. And so with that, I just want to thank you so much, Ashley, for your time tonight. All of your experiences that you've shared, all of the knowledge that you have has been completely invaluable to a new turkey hunter. And we've got 30 something participants on live tonight and many more folks to be learning in the future. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to say, definitely take an unsuccessful hunt is never an unsuccessful hunt. I have messed up more hunts than I've had successful ones, and I take away something from every single one. So try to, if something doesn't go as planned, that's gonna happen. That's turkey hunting, and don't let that discourage you. Learn from it and use it the next time. So I hope everybody has a good season and has some luck this year. So.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I have a couple closing comments. Let me just jump in here. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. I've really had fun this past month doing this webinar series with you all and getting to know some of you. Obviously, it would be more fun if we were in person, but we appreciate you joining us virtually until we can do that again. And so if you're tuning in on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you click the bell, you'll get notifications when we put up new content and when we go live again. Also, if you have turkey hunting questions that you didn't get answered tonight or from the other webinars, then tune into the Kentucky Afield Facebook page. And on April 6th, they're doing a live turkey call-in show. So you can ask your questions live there as well. And so with that, thank you again for this wonderful experience, and we'll see you next time.